Well, hello. I'm here with Doug to talk about InfoWars, among other things. And it is Friday, November 15, 2024.
That would be Alex Jones InfoWars, would it not?
It would be. And so it got bought by The Onion, the satirical news site. And of course, when I first saw the article, I thought it was a joke, but
I did too.
it's not a joke. The Onion actually did it, and they did it with consulting with the victims of the Sandy Hill hoax that he perpetrated. So they're buying it. They're going to turn it into a satire site. Alex Jones is going to have to move to a different platform. And, while he's moving, the thing that really puzzles me is why hasn't Trump hired him yet to be part of his cabinet? He should be the press secretary. That would be perfect.
Yeah.
Every presidential press briefing would be him screaming about aliens or uh, dead presidents coming back to life or something insane like that. It would totally suit the Trump administration.
Or why doesn't he hire Joe Rogan?
Well, Joe Rogan is too logical and sane. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Also, Joe
Okay.
Rogan would go on for 3 hours.
Okay. That's
No, Alex
a
Jones,
good point.
Alex Jones screaming would be perfect. You just say that because the aliens have taken over your mind and the
Yeah.
parasites are tearing your brain. That's why you talk like this.
So it was bought at auction,
Yeah.
liquidation of InfoWars assets.
Well, sure, because
And
they're in incredible debt. They owe like $1 billion to the people
yeah.
he hooks. So obviously they have to liquidate everything to come up with some tiny percentage of that to pay them.
And have you followed the Alex Jones saga? He owes the Sandy Hook parents
Right.
or victims' parents
Yeah.
in the millions,
Billions.
billions of
billion
dollars.
dollars. Well, I saw it, and he, of course, doesn't have that, but he spent a lot of time trying to hide his assets, moving them to his wife or somewhere else. And they're, of
And
course,
parents,
and,
yeah.
and they're trying to claw them back. And so, it'll be battles in court forever.
So did any of that money get returned that
I,
he transferred, or do we know?
oh, I don't think anything's been resolved yet.
Okay, so
This
it's
stuff takes years being snarled up in court.
I see. So this was liquidation of InfoWars.
Yeah, that
And
was what they wanted to have.
do you know what the Onion paid?
They haven't released that information.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
I
see
can't
that either.
imagine it would be much because I don't really think the Onion has a lot of money. I mean, they've been around since the 80s, but they remind me of Mad Magazine. I mean, these kind of
Yeah.
I don't think these kind of satire sites make a lot of money.
I, you never know, but the videos, some of them I've seen are very well done.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they're turning a profit, but I don't think they have, vast amounts of money to buy
They're
anything very
they're
expensive.
not selling supplements and
Yeah.
doomsday or prepper materials, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that's the biggest news.
Yeah, well, hopefully uh, nothing good is going to come out of this, but maybe turning it into a satire is the best solution out of this.
Best comment I saw on Mastodon, a guy said, all they have to do is leave the content unchanged. It's already a satire, which you could certainly say. But also,
Yeah.
I think they now own all of his back catalog of videos, so they can like cut and modify that to make.
Oh, I think that would be hysterical, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. What else you got for us? You got another one?
Well, there's an interesting story, which in retrospect should have been obvious. Ars Technica has a story showing that all those traffic image captures that you see, where it says click everything that is a motorcycle or a crosswalk, AI can do
Yeah.
this 100% of the time trivially. And now that I think about it, even the little AIs that my students make in class could probably beat those. Recognizing, in fact, that's the one of the classic things you do in AI is you recognize images that are articles of clothing to tell like a shirt from a shoe. It's essentially the same thing. It doesn't even
Yeah.
sophisticated AI to do that.
So, I have not seen those for some time. They've kind of disappeared.
Well, they upgraded Google CAPTCHA thing a few years ago, so most of the time you just check a box and it notices something about your mouse movement and decides you're human. And
Yeah.
only if you fail that test do you see the grid of pictures. I see it now and then.
Oh, you do. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're right. If you have a mouse and that capture box picks up, if the
Yeah.
mouse immediately moves directly to the box, then it's AI or there's something artificial going on. Because as you drag your mouse, it's never a straight line like a ruler.
I imagine it's something like that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
can tell something about the movement or if you're a natural human, which makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. It makes perfect sense. Except, and I haven't seen this happen, what if you have a touch screen?
I would imagine, I don't know. But the other thing I think is
Yeah,
it would probably be very easy to write code that would gradually move the mouse there and click it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't think this is
yeah.
going to stay a strong defense forever.
Well, we've seen there's a device that you can purchase, a mouse wiggler, mouse
Yeah.
jiggler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Sam, I wanted to ask you, we talked earlier, previous episode about Apple
Right.
and the Apple phones rebooting.
Right.
And I'm wondering, can we get an update to that?
Yeah, I mean, the original story was from, I think, a police source that said and I didn't know this, but apparently the standard thing they do is they take suspects' iPhones back and plug them into a charger in the wall and just leave them sit on a shelf for a long time before they analyze them. And
Yeah.
found that they were rebooting, and others in the same room were rebooting too. So they said if they can't reach the cell tower within 24 hours, they reboot. And that turned out not to be the case. What it is now, Apple has upgraded their operating system, and if you do not unlock the phone for 3 days, it reboots.
Oh, that's it?
That's it. But again, this is considered, I don't quite know why they do this actually. But I mean, the original one made more sense to me. If you can't reach the cell tower, then you conclude the operating system has probably crashed and we should reboot. I don't know why
Yeah.
just not unlocking it for a few days means it should reboot. But I guess the logic is, I'm just guessing, is that that means it's been stolen. Because if you had your phone, you would unlock it every day and use it. So if it spends 3 days without getting unlocked, then apparently it's no longer in your possession, and therefore it should reboot to go back to the maximally encrypted state where nobody can get in without your PIN code. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that. That would make sense.
But
Um,
how many iPhones can live for 3 days without getting charged? I guess that's why it seems like only police impound or a thief would create this situation where you plugged it into charge, but it sits 3 days without being used. Anyway,
well, it could also be you lost your phone. You dropped it,
yeah, then
you left.
then after 3 days, the battery would be dead, which would already accomplish the same thing.
If the phone's not being used, do you think a battery would die in 3 days?
Well, I think so,
I
but
don't think so.
you could be right. Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
So what you're saying is it was a coincidence that the police reported this, that all the other phones were rebooting.
yeah, the original thought that was sending a signal to the other phones, making them,
Yeah.
and I haven't seen that in a more modern story. So I think that was, I don't know, maybe the other phones just had the latest version of iOS too.
And it was just coincidence that they just happened to be impounded maybe at the same time or
Yeah.
close enough.
Well, I imagine, I
And
mean, I think a lot of people update their iPhones. So if you just impound iPhones at a crime scene, then
yeah.
most of them will have the latest iOS.
Well, no, what I'm getting at is there may have been two or three
Yeah.
impounds
Yeah.
completely separate,
Yeah.
but they're kept in the same room over a weekend or over a long weekend. They all would have rebooted,
Yeah, something like
not at the exact same moment, but depending on when the capture was, something like
that.
that.
Yeah, that seems
So,
the most reasonable explanation given the information we have now. Yeah.
yeah, meaning it was again all coincidence.
Yeah, but there really was an important issue for forensic exam.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the update on that. How about let's have another story?
Yeah, well, there's a pretty interesting one. Um, and it's on Gizmodo. There's a satellite called Skynet 1A, which I think was a UK satellite. It was UK's oldest satellite, and it went out of service long ago, and they parked it in an orbit just for it to sit there until the end of time. And now, when they check, somebody has moved it halfway around the world from where it should be, and
What?
nobody knows how they did it or why. Apparently, it does have some fuel and a motor, and apparently the Americans have control of that engine. They at some point early in its life, the Americans used it briefly. So apparently somebody in America turned on the engine and moved it, and nobody noticed.
And what, do we know more what the satellite does?
Oh, I think it was a weather satellite. It's been dead for 50 years. I think it was originally,
50.
yeah,
Wait,
it,
50, 50.
yeah. So it was
Yeah.
originally launched in 1969 to a geostationary orbit over Africa and was used by the British military for communications. At the end of its lifetime, it was supposed to drift towards a point where it can die in peace. And it was mysteriously commanded to a new location above the Americas, the BBC reported. Nobody knows why or how.
That's, and we're sure this wasn't an accidental drift of halfway around the world
Apparently,
over.
well, I don't know. They've it
Okay.
recently was reported. I imagine everyone's going to be looking at explanations.
Yeah. So this is like the satellite Caitlin told us about that the Navy launched
Yeah,
in the 1980s for communication to ships out in the Pacific. And when the Navy decommissioned it, they said, okay, let's turn it off. We're not going to use it anymore. And they said, oh, we forgot to put an off switch. So we can't turn it off.
well, yeah,
So now the and it was a relay satellite that was open, so Mexican drug lords
yeah,
and others are now using it.
yeah. I heard about this. There's quite a few that are just uh, dumb repeaters, and so you can make your homemade cell phone out of discarded radio parts, and people are doing it in Mexico and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, pretty funny.
yeah,
I mean, who would have thought that back then? But
yeah.
we live and learn, huh? But yeah,
I think all security is all like this. All you can do is protect yourself against the current threats, and within a few years, you'll be vulnerable to something you didn't think of.
yeah, yeah. I have to agree.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I have one for you. As of less than a year, so on October 14th, 2025, Microsoft no longer provides free support for Windows Update, technical assistance, security fixes for Windows 10.
right.
Your PC will still continue to work, but they suggest moving to Windows 11.
But you usually cannot because it doesn't have TPM2.
Correct. So I have a number of
Huge,
computers.
huge number of computers are basically consigned to be discarded, even though they're working perfectly fine
Yeah, yeah. And as we've learned, is the TPM chip required?
for Windows 11, and they keep on
I, it,
uploading the loop workarounds.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Should I say, does the TPM provide the security performance that's needed? And I think we determined, we talked about this a while back, that TPM isn't that secure, is not as
Well,
secure as.
Well, TPM2 is in theory more secure than TPM 1.1, but in practice, there's no difference anybody would notice. I mean, it's using slightly more modern cryptographic algorithms, but it's not like the old ones are broken.
Yeah, but I thought there was a flaw or a vulnerability in there.
I don't know. There might be.
Okay, maybe we'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
I thought you brought that up as a story
If so,
maybe
I
a month.
forgot, but that could happen.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the main thing, which I hear Steve Gibson talk about all the time, which is quite correct, is that the old one is good enough. Like he's still using Windows 7. That's why he pushes zero patch. Zero Patch is the non-Microsoft service that patches code in RAM, and he said it'll continue to be those updates will continue to be for old versions of the operating system, and they even fix things that Microsoft refuses to fix, and third-party software. So it sounds like a pretty good product.
So wait, so Steve Gibson from Security Now is giving this away?
No, it's a British company, and they sell it for like $25 a year.
Oh, I see. It's a subscription
Yeah.
service,
And
third party.
you run an agent on your machine, and it
Yeah.
patches the RAM, which is usually like 25 bytes, just a few machine language instruction. And they reverse engineer all the Microsoft patches, and then they write ones themselves for 0 days and third-party products. So it's actually pretty brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Huh.
You can keep using
Interesting.
old versions of EOS, which is, I think, what most Windows users would like to. As far as I know, 90% of Windows users would be perfectly happy to keep using Windows XP. It was fine, or Windows 7. And I mean, I certainly have no interest in trying to figure out where Microsoft hid everything in their latest version of garbage. I'd still be using XP.
Yeah. It's like getting into a rental car. Where's the light switch? Where do you put the key in?
And for no
Right?
reason.
Where's the.
The actual fundamentals are the same. My students are always asking me, what version can I use? And I say, when on my malware analysis and stuff, and I say, it doesn't matter what version you use. We're just like
Yeah.
part of the Linux and the heart of Windows, and that stuff isn't changing. They just put like a different layer of paint on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But they move all the controls around.
Yeah, and I think it's just some kind of make work inside Microsoft. I think every team wants to say they did something new. So they just sort
Yeah.
of reshuffle things and have the new version, but nobody asked for, nobody wants. and it doesn't meet
Yeah.
its needs. Like Windows 8. Windows 8, you were at this conference. I went to a teacher's conference, and there was a whole week of training in user interface design. And they had a lunchtime meeting where that teacher showed up. And I said, all right, explain to me what's going on with Windows 8. And he actually said, Windows 8 is a great user interface, and the users that complain are just wrong. And I thought that was pretty hilarious. Like, my theory is right, and the evidence is just wrong.
Sam, that could have been me. I thought Windows 8 was great.
Well,
And
there was some.
the reason why is because you had the touch screen interface with the tiles, much like Apple, but then you could flip it back to a Windows 7 interface, a GUI interface. So if you had touch screen, you had the tiles to work with. If you wanted to go back to a Windows XP, Windows 7, all you had to do is toggle it.
Well, I couldn't figure any of that out. There was no start button. The only thing I could do was open a command prompt and run it the way I used to run MS-DOS, which is basically how I'm learning to do everything in Windows. Just like open the network connections pane, which they keep hiding, just
Yeah.
control net connections too. I think the way to use Windows now is to go back to learn the MS-DOS commands and just use them forever because the GUI is complete garbage and they keep changing it.
Yeah, yeah. PowerShell is what Microsoft would
Well,
prefer that you learn.
Well, I would, except just yesterday. I was teaching a
Yes.
class and the student set up an Azure Linux machine. And I said, okay, let's SSH in and let's open PowerShell, and SSH doesn't work. So let's find the command to install PowerShell, and it installs and it still doesn't work. So we had to download PuTTY like it was 1993. And I'm like, God damn. I mean, how did Microsoft manage to screw up SSH in PowerShell on Windows 11 when they finally had SSH after 30 years, and then they screw it up?
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is the Microsoft I've come to know and love.
So are you sure it wasn't a certificate issue, something along those lines?
I don't know. You went in there and type SSH. It says SSH not found. Don't know what you're talking about. So I Google how to install SSH, and it has the add component command in
Yep.
PowerShell to install SSH. Then it has the command to see if it's there, and it says yes, it's there. Then you type SSH, and it's not there.
All right.
Microsoft. This is typical life at Microsoft. This is the Microsoft I know and love.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'm sure there is some knowledge base article telling me, oh, you have to change this registry key and reboot the machine and put on this patch and then it'll work.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some security toggle to allow to open up access.
Yeah.
Firewall issues, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Yeah.
I'm still a Windows 8.1 fan, not
Oh,
8,
that's
but
good.
8.1, where you can
Well,
toggle, but life goes on.
well, you were always the Microsoft evangelist, which is fine. You have to have one,
Well,
like a
you got
token.
to use some operating system.
You do. And by the way, it's not like Apple is a bed of roses. One thing about Apple is every time you update to the next version of the OS, I get locked out of the keychain and lose my passwords, and there is no going back. Apple has its significant irritating flaws too. You never can.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect. But
And
anyway,
then Linux, you
oh,
keep
yeah.
getting different flavors and
Well,
keep getting,
to be fair, I've never tried actually living on Linux, but
no,
I think Android is the closest you get to it. And Android has its own amazing flaws. Like most Android phones never get security updates at all, which is really, really bad.
yeah, yeah. All
So,
right, let's go on. Let's move on. Next story. What do you got for us?
well, this is the new Android feature. The new Google Pixel AI will protect you from scams, but the way it protects you from scams is by listening into all your phone calls, digitizing them, and deciding whether this conversation looks suspicious. So that's pretty intrusive. I mean, it's like everybody's doing the same thing. Microsoft is putting in Recall, Apple is putting in Apple Intelligence, and now Google is putting in the same thing. An AI agent running on your phone that is spying on everything you do to supposedly offer you some questionable benefit.
That's funny.
And I think everybody is very nervous about the privacy implications of these things for good reason.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, it's certainly, they
Hmm.
do have a point that it would be nice if your phone would protect you from scams.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah.
I,
I'd like email service that would do that as well.
yeah, yeah.
And,
And
and
I get two or three calls from spammers. And the funny thing is, It's the same people. And every time I answer, there's dead silence for 10 seconds, and then this funny bloop. So if that sound, I know it's the crooks, and I hang up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't update their software, I guess.
So yeah, and Sam, Apple released their AI, right? Apple Intelligence,
Well, actually, they've only released like the first
a
few features
Porsche.
that are really
Yeah.
mild. It doesn't yet have the one that seems to spy on everything you do. Right now, it just has stuff like, cleaning up images and things, which people say is nice, but, Android's actually had that for a few years. The part where it makes a personalized butler that knows everything about you and tells you it's time to take a nap or something, that hasn't come out yet.
I see.
Their original
Okay.
promise was it'll tell you, oh no, you have yoga at that time. You have to move this dinner date to another appointment or something, remind you of your appointments, like a secretary, which might be nice if it worked.
Yeah. Did Apple just release another product this
They
past
did
week
this
or
released the whole flood of the new hardware, the M4 stuff. I
yeah,
see
okay.
they saying which M4 is better than the other. I haven't paid any attention because I'm still using the M1 and it's fine. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the M3 and M4 are better, but the M1 is still working great. No reason to upgrade yet.
Yeah. So Apple's got the same problem that Microsoft has. Why upgrade?
Yeah,
Why update? Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So, their product is fine. And I'm a pretty heavy duty power user. I've got, 25 virtual machines on there and stuff, and I'm constantly doing video streaming and stuff, but still it's working fine.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
even archiving all my videos on it. I haven't even filled up the SSD yet.
Do you
Anyway,
have terabyte or a half
two
terabyte?
terabyte, two
You have
terabyte.
two?
Yeah. And I started
Oh,
archiving almost all my videos ever since YouTube kept threatening to cancel me and throw away all my stuff. And so far, nothing is
so
working.
far so good.
I know, much longer than I expected to keep using it. So,
So do you use iCloud at all for
no,
storage? No.
no. I do pay for extra Gmails, Google storage, and I have automatic backups of my stuff to there.
Yeah, okay.
So you have to
So
have,
I use iCloud because I have to. I have to pay them the dollar of the month, and the reason that I pay them for that
yeah,
is because to back up my cell phone.
yeah,
If because there's just enough data to push you over the edge
yeah,
that you have to pay the dollar a month or else you don't get a full backup.
yeah. I've heard this. It's only $1 a month. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
My phone is technically not being backed up, and I really think I don't care because
Well, you could
just
just
have a
plug it into can't you plug it into your computer, back it up there?
I I don't know. I think iTunes has been deprecated for years, and I don't know. Okay, the question is, do I really care? I mean, I
Yeah,
could
you
put
do
apps
care
on.
because if your phone gets stolen, you don't have to reprogram everything.
Sure, but the only thing I would lose is my photos, which I don't really care about too much. And the apps, I wouldn't mind just putting on the apps again. In fact, is most of the apps on my phone are ones I put on just to test the security of them anyway.
Yeah, I'll have to say I probably have 5, 6 pages of apps, and if I'd sit down sometime, I'd probably go down to one, maybe two,
Oh, yeah.
probably two.
Yeah, I think there's really only like 10 apps I use normally, and the rest
Yeah,
would be gone and I wouldn't care.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, this one came up. Have any plans to fly to Haiti?
No. In fact, I
No.
haven't heard anything good about Haiti in 30 years.
Yeah, well, it turns out that there's flights either to or from Haiti. Spirit Airlines, they found bullet holes in them. And same with American Airlines. So 3 flights have been hit. There was a flight attendant that got some shrapnel.
Well, their president just got executed like a year or two ago. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they're basically having a violent revolution there or something, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, isn't that perpetual in Haiti?
Well, I think it got a lot worse. I remember hearing during the
Yeah.
pandemic there was a bunch of American mercenaries were hired to go over and kill the president.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and they went over. They didn't tell them what they were doing, and then they just abandoned them there to be locked up. So it's pretty outrageous.
Yeah. Interesting, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, all flights to Haiti have been banned for 30 days.
yeah.
And I think there were some aid flights, government aids or, where humanitarian aid, where we're sending uh, medical supplies, I don't know, food over.
which I'm
And
sure they
so,
need. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I
which
think,
has all been suspended.
yeah, but I mean, I think it's been in political turmoil for a long time, and people are not getting basic services, and it's pretty awful.
Yeah, and I just have to ask. I wonder how come and I don't know the answer to this, but how come America hasn't stepped in there?
I don't know. I
It's
just
a close neighbor of ours.
no, and I think there's arguments that their problems are really our fault for exploiting them. I don't know. I
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
reminds me.
yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. That would probably make things a lot worse. Who knows?
Well, yeah, apparently, yeah, it's a good question. But America's moving into an isolationist phase, especially now with Trump getting back in.
Yeah,
The rest of the world can just go
yes.
to hell and we'll hide here like we were doing before World War II.
Yeah, and how'd that turn out? Oh, yeah, we know the answer to that one.
Well, the answer is right. The cucks eventually dragged us into this war where we should have been on Hitler's side all along. I think that's going to be the story that the history books will show, at least in Florida.
Yeah, maybe,
And
maybe.
if Alex Jones was the press secretary or maybe the national archivist, he could like clean up the Library of Congress so it reflects that story too.
I think you're right. I think you're right. All right.
I might have a
Let's
piece.
move on. What else you have today?
So C, as you probably know, C, the language C and C++ and all, are very unsafe, and they lead to just
Yes.
many, many generations of memory corruption flaws. So now Microsoft and the Linux Foundation are moving to Rust and rewriting the core of the operating system to some extent in Rust. But so the developers of C have struck back. They have developed something. They promised they're going to develop something called Trap C, which is a version of C without so many memory corruption problems, and therefore people can keep on using C. So we'll see. They haven't written it yet, but they, of course, are not happy, are not willing to admit that C is just too dangerous to use and people should use Rust instead. So we can look
And
for.
Sam, so what's your opinion on this?
Oh, I love Rust. Rust is really nice. And I like
Yeah.
other people that write code. I tried it and it really, all the studies, the surveys have shown for the last several years that like 90% of all developers say if I could choose my language, I would use Rust. It is so nice. It is like C with all the stupidity removed.
I see. And is it more secure in your opinion?
Oh, much more secure. It fixes
Yeah.
top 10 flaws of C. There are still ways to make insecure code, but C has just a number of ridiculous pitfalls that hit you when you don't see it coming. Like you define a variable, then you read some data into the variable, and then poof, some other variable changed value. And you were supposed to just know that. Like, God damn it. And
Yeah. Okay.
you have a number counting how many times people have done something, and you add to it, and then suddenly it rolls around and turns negative, and it's a small number. And you were supposed to see that coming. You're like, how was I supposed to see that coming? And you allocate memory, and then you free it. Then you write another routine that uses that memory, and it also frees it. Well, now you got a double free. Ha ha ha! Now people can take over the box. There are so many, and it's so much better in Rust, for example. You allocate memory, and it's in scope. You have curly brace beginning the module where you allocated the memory. As soon as you pass the closing curly brace, that variable is no longer in scope and it's automatically freed. So, gee,
Okay.
failing to use after free and double free are just gone. You can't make that mistake.
I see. I see.
And
So
they just basically thought of all the things C does to you and they carefully fixed them. So, like if you try to add to an integer and it rolls around and turns negative, the program stops with an error message. Whoops, you can't do that. That's a whole lot friendlier than just getting the wrong number and continuing to run.
yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it. Got
It's
it.
it's
So it sounds like this would be a major overhaul to see to a certain extent.
That's essentially what it is. And
Yeah.
the hardcore C coders, of course, the whole point of C was written in, I think, 1979. And the point was to put you really close to the hardware. Well, all C is a slightly easier way to write assembler. And so if you really understand
Yeah.
every bit and every bit flip, you can write C code that will do magic, like solve a problem incredibly fast by some arcane, complicated binary working. And that's why the experts love it. If you are a serious binary jockey, you can write super fast, perfect code in C. But that's only 1% of the developers. The rest of them are trying to write normal apps. and they really don't understand exactly where every bit is going.
And
Nobody,
those are the days where we had 512K
oh
of
yeah,
RAM,
oh yeah,
right? K of RAM,
oh
not gigs.
when I started I mean, I started with I think I got the eight.
64K,
No,
48.
no, no. I had a Sinclair
Oh,
one with 1K.
1K.
I got the 8K expansion module, and then I had the VIC 20 with 20K. And I wrote assembly code on that stuff. I got $600 for writing a kaleidoscope that ran fast on the VIC 20. I mean, that was why you wrote assembly code, because the processor was 8-bit processor 6502 running at one half of 1 megahertz. And you
Yeah,
could get stuff done, but you had to write it in assembler.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So C was kind of the next big evolutionary step that was accepted.
C was the easy way to write assembler. And it's still,
Yeah,
I'm teaching it next semester. I'm teaching assembler. And so the first thing you do is you teach them C. And once you understand C, it's only a little bit further to just understand assembler.
yeah,
Practically already. So, I mean, if you really want to control that machine, you use C. But if you just want to get the job done, then you use something more modern like Python or Rust.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so Rust is what was I going to say? So Rust also is like C, but it's more abstract from assembler.
Uh, yes, Rust is, the code looks a lot like C, but it just is, you specify things in more detail. Like and it notices, like in C, for example, one of the things you can do, you define a character variable, then you start adding numbers to it, then you roll it up past 127 to 255, then it rolls around to 0 because characters variables are just integers. And strings are just integer byte arrays. And none of this makes any sense. This made some sense in like 1980 when the only language you thought about was English. But even then it was wrong because
Yeah,
anything above 127 is not valid. So there really ought to be
yeah.
a character variable that is different than an integer variable, but it isn't. And they all did that at that time. Um, and that's why I got used to that. When I finally learned Python 3, I was very confused because I just had thought that strings were integer arrays, but they're not. A modern string is a series of characters, and each character is a Unicode character, which has a variable width from 1 to 4 bytes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
a string is a list of those things. That's what a string should be. It's completely different than a byte array, which is just a series of byte variables that go from 0 to 255.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in Rust, those two are completely different, like all modern languages. You specify what you're doing, and if you try to use it for something else, it stops and gives you an error message and says, no, you can't put that in here.
So is Rust a little bit further away from assembly than C is?
You could say that, yeah, but
So it
not that.
and performance wise,
It,
is Rust a little bit less efficient?
well, people claim it's just as fast as C once it's compiled, um,
I see. Okay.
which is why they're putting it in the kernel. The kernel efficiency is everything.
Yeah.
Remember a week or so ago, Linus Torvalds found a way to make a new patch for the Spectre meltdown vulnerabilities that makes the kernel run 2.7% faster. And people say, he's a genius. This is awesome because, the kernel is the heart of everything. Making it even a little bit faster affects every app in the world and therefore is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. It's good that we talk about this and
Yeah. Yeah.
simplify it to a certain degree and put things in context. All right. So, do we have another
Yeah. I got a
story
couple
for us?
more. Ross
Couple more.
Ulbricht. Ross Ulbricht, the guy that ran Silk Road.
Yes.
Got
Yes.
two
He
life
was
sentences. Yeah.
he was arrested in San Francisco library by the FBI.
Yep, like 12 or 14 years ago. He's been in
Yes.
prison. He got 2 life sentences. And I talked to the guy, a guest in my class who was the head of the FBI's cybercrime force. And I asked him, why did he get such a stiff kind of punishment? And he said, for the drugs. And I said, oh, I forgot about drugs being illegal. I'm from San Francisco. I thought it might be the murders, but they didn't care about the murders. He paid for 6 murders, which apparently none of them really happened, but he believed they happened and bragged about it. Um,
Okay.
he paid for hit jobs, and then guys will like make a deal. How about you cancel your account and we'll say you're dead, and we split the money.
So yeah, who is he trying to kill? Do you
Well,
recall?
people that would come on the platform and then do something like hack it and start revealing people's real names so the cops could arrest them and stuff. People that would mess with the business.
I see. Okay.
Basically, other criminals muscling in on the territory, just like every other gangster. That's who
Yeah.
is the rivals. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
so anyway, Trump has promised to pardon him many times to please
Really?
for the libertarians and stuff. Because for the libertarians say drugs should be legal anyway, so this guy shouldn't be locked up. So Trump has promised to pardon him, and he said, "This is great. I see the light of freedom coming." Trump promised to pardon him on day one. So pretty soon we'll find out if Trump pardons him on day one. Also, Julian Assange. So
Ah, okay.
we'll see. Now Trump has a pretty good record of forgetting all his promises, but we'll see what he does.
Are you saying he's senile?
No, he's just a con man. He just tells every audience what they want to hear, and it falls out of his brain usually like two sentences later, and he contradicts it, and nobody cares. But anyway, there's also one more in the domain of strict information security, which I thought is pretty interesting. The Five Eyes have revealed the 15 most exploited flaws of 2023, and they are very surprising. I'm old enough to remember a few years ago when flaws were in software like Windows and Office, and you didn't even think about anybody hacking your routers or firewalls or anything.
Right.
And now all of them are hardware. It's incredible. The top 15 routinely exploited vulnerabilities in 2023, the first two are Citrix, um, NetScaler. The next two are iOS, Cisco's iOS, Cisco appliances. The next one is Fortinet. Then you get the first one that's what I would call software, Move It, the transfer agent. Then Atlassian Confluence, then Apache's Log4j, still out there, even though it should have been passed years ago. Then you go to Barracuda, and Microsoft is like the 10th one down. So this is something I've been expecting for years, is that people will hit your hardware devices on the edge of your network, which are totally unprotected. There's no antivirus, there's no integrity controls. And this, remember when uh the Russians dumped out the NSA's exploits that they got. And most of them were how to take over firewalls and stuff, which surprised me at the time. Apparently that the intelligence agency figured out years ago that the soft spot on your network is the hardware edge devices. And they started hacking them, and they're just sitting ducks pretty much. And apparently that's really true now. And they're reached the point where that is the most exploited vulnerability, which is a real important thing. And I've been railing about this for more than a year on the Pulse Security podcast. They should make a secure edge device. How hard could it be to make a device where the operating system cannot change, where it totally verifies the cryptographic hash of it at every boot up or something, so you can't put malware on it?
Wait, I thought Cisco does that already.
Well, apparently it doesn't work.
Okay. So what you're saying is on a like a router,
Yeah.
malware is injected into Cisco's operating system.
Well, they get command injection anyway. I don't know if they can put persistent malware in, but they are getting command execution on it.
So there's a vulnerability in the running code
Yeah.
of the operating system in the router firewall,
Yeah.
or what NetScaler, some of these other devices, Barracuda. Yeah,
They've
but
all got the usual stuff, SQL injection, memory corruption,
yeah.
kind of thing.
So you can have code injection, but if you were to reboot, then
Uh, I know
presume
I know some of them actually have bootkits. You can infect themselves to resist past a bootkit, but there's different types of infection.
yeah, obviously. Yeah,
But they are
yeah.
vulnerable, and you know, I don't know. It seems to be harder than I would imagine to make one of those things really strong. I would think you could just make a really strong one that verifies everything, and then charge more money for it, and people would pay for
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
it. Anyway, that's the last one I had, but I was very
All
surprised
right.
to see so much hardware hacking going on.
Yeah, interesting. So what that indicates, I think, is the bar for the operating systems have been raised
Yes.
to make it easier to go after the operating systems of hardware devices.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. We've been railing about the CVE list and patches and like
Yes.
Patch Tuesday and everything for about 20 years. And really the result is that stuff is not as bad as it used to be. It used to be
Yeah.
ridiculously easy to hack into Windows and Office, and now it's not. So the weak spot is now the firewalls, which have not yet gone through as many years of finding the flaws and patching them, I think.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Interesting.
it isn't even any antivirus running on them, and there really obviously should be.
Yeah. 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 Well, who would have thought that, right?
Oh, I
Even
remember talking about this 20 years ago. Like
okay.
there was an attack 20 years ago that infected the firmware of your NIC card. And I said,
Yeah.
every little
Yeah.
component in your computer has like memory and an operating system of some kind, and it could all be infected. Really, it should all be protected by something. And now on Paul's Security podcast, they're always talking about all the secure boot limitations and problems. Secure boot is a nightmare. Holy cow. There's like 3 or 4 stages of code that loads and runs with system privileges, and it hasn't really been verified because you can't do that until later. So there's all kinds of opportunities to exploit it. And there's a product people make to try to secure this. And, that's probably the next area of exploitation coming. It's a weak spot that people haven't really figured out how to secure yet. And
I see.
there's always a weak spot.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. I think that's it for me. We
Yeah.
resume, have another podcast on Tuesday, huh?
Yeah, that's right. And by then, we will have the results of CPTC. My team is competing starting tomorrow. So last year, apparently, we made second place. So maybe they'll do better this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very
Okay.
good.
All right.